The bus rolled into Batesburg, South Carolina, in the dark hours of February 1946. Isaac Woodard had already survived war. He had already worn the uniform of the United States Army. He had already done what his country asked him to do. The bus hisses to a stop under a single streetlight. Isaac steps down carefully, adjusting his military cap, carrying a small duffel bag. His uniform is immaculate, his posture proud despite obvious fatigue. The humid southern air seems to press down on everything. A few other passengers disembark and quickly disappear into the darkness. Now, he was only trying to finish the trip home, but in too many parts of America, a black man in uniform was still expected to bow his head, lower his eyes, and accept whatever humiliation came his way. Isaac did not do that. Isaac's face in profile, lit by the streetlight. His expression shows quiet determination, dignity, and the bearing of a man who has seen combat. His eyes are forward, not downcast. We can see the strength and resolve that war has forged in him. Not because he was looking for trouble, not because he was reckless, but because something inside him had changed. War changes a man. Service changes a man. The police officer approaches Isaac from behind, his hand resting on his nightstick. Isaac turns, maintaining his military posture. The two men face each other under the dim streetlight. The contrast between Isaac's dignity and the officer's hostility is palpable. The empty street stretches behind them. To stand in uniform, to carry the rank and responsibility of a soldier, to serve under the flag of your country that does something to the soul. It teaches you that you are a man. And Isaac Woodard knew he was a man. When the police chief in Batesburg confronted him, the tension that had started on the bus turned deadly. There, in the darkness of a southern street, the law did not act like law. It acted like power. Isaac was taken off that bus not as a hero returning home, but as a target. He was cursed, he was threatened, he was beaten. The blows came hard and fast, not with justice, not with restraint, but with the full force of a system that wanted black people, even black veterans, to remember their place. And that was the point. This was bigger than one officer, bigger than one bus stop, bigger than one town in South Carolina. Because what happened to Isaac Woodard that night was America sending a message to black soldiers returning from war. Isaac's military cap lies in the gravel, a symbol of service dishonored. The camera slowly pulls back to reveal the empty street. The cap represents all that Isaac had earned through his service, now literally and figuratively cast aside by the very country he served. You may wear the uniform. You may fight on foreign soil. You may bleed for this country. But do not come home expecting freedom. Do not come home expecting dignity. Do not come home expecting equal protection under the law. Isaac was struck again and again. The uniform that should have protected him did not protect him. The service that should have honored him did not shield him. The nation he had served allowed a local officer to treat him like his life did not matter. On that roadside, in that darkness, patriotism met white supremacy face to face, and white supremacy swung first. By the time the beating was over, Isaac Woodard's life had changed forever. In that darkness, the violence did not stop at the beating. It took Isaac Woodard's sight. But the worst part was still to come. Morning did not bring relief. It brought darkness. Not the darkness of night, but a deeper darkness, the kind that does not lift when the sun rises. Isaac Woodard had survived war abroad, only to awaken in his own country, unable to see. The blows from that roadside did not end when the officer stepped away. They followed him into the morning. They followed him into the hospital. They followed him into every hour that came after. At first, there may have been confusion, pain, swelling, disbelief, the kind of terrible hope that tells a man this must only be temporary. that surely this cannot be how the story ends. But the truth settled in slowly and mercilessly. Isaac Woodard had been blinded. Think about the cruelty of that. A soldier trained to stay alert. A man taught to observe, to endure, to survive. A veteran who had worn his country's uniform with discipline and pride, and now the very eyes that had carried him through war were gone, destroyed not by a foreign enemy, but by racist violence at home. Blindness is not only a wound to the body, it is a wound to independence, to confidence, to identity, to the simple dignity of moving through the world on your own terms. To wake up and realize that the world has been taken from you, that is its own kind of violence. And Isaac had to face that violence, not in enemy territory, but in the country he had served. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not one bad moment that could be explained away. This was the full moral failure of a nation that asked black men to fight for freedom while denying them the most basic protections of citizenship at home. What happened in Batesburg could have disappeared into the silence of the South. One more life broken in darkness, one more act of brutality buried without consequence. But Isaac Woodard's story did not stay buried. It began to travel, from hospital rooms to headlines, from private pain to public outrage, from one wounded veteran to the conscience of a nation. And once the country saw what had been done to him, it became harder and harder to pretend that this was justice or democracy or freedom for all. Because Isaac Woodard had lost his sight, but through his suffering, America was about to be forced to see. What happened to Isaac Woodard did not remain hidden for long. The violence that shattered his life on a dark roadside in South Carolina began to move beyond one town, beyond one police officer, beyond one wounded veteran. His story traveled from whispered disbelief to public outrage. People began to understand that this was not simply an assault. It was a revelation. It revealed what Black Americans had always known and what the nation too often refused to face. A Black man could fight for his country, wear its uniform, risk his life under its flag, and still come home to be beaten, blinded, and denied justice. That truth was too heavy to stay buried. Isaac Woodard's suffering became a mirror held up to America. And what the country saw in that mirror was ugly. It saw the lie of equal justice. It saw the brutality of racism not as an isolated sin, but as a system protected by badges, custom, silence, and power. And once that truth entered the public conscience, it began to move people who could no longer look away. Black communities understood immediately that Isaac Woodard's story was not his alone, and it belonged to a larger American reckoning that had been waiting, building, pressing against the walls of silence for far too long. When the case went to court, many hoped justice would finally speak. Many hoped that what had been done to Isaac Woodard was too horrific, too visible, too undeniable to ignore. But hope and justice are not always the same thing. The officer who brutalized Isaac Woodard was tried. And yet, even with the truth before the nation, the machinery of injustice still turned as it had turned before. The courtroom did not become a place of healing. It became another reminder of how difficult it was for Black Americans to find justice inside institutions built without them in mind. The man who destroyed Isaac Woodard's sight was acquitted, and that verdict said its own terrible thing. It said that even blindness could be dismissed. Even service could be dismissed. Even obvious suffering could be explained away when the victim was Black and the system was determined to protect its own. That failure mattered. It mattered because it exposed the moral emptiness at the heart of segregation-era justice. It mattered because it showed that the violence was not only in the beating, the violence was also in the refusal to punish it. But history did not stop in that courtroom. The injustice done to Isaac Woodard helped stir national pressure. It helped force powerful people to confront what segregation was really doing to American life. His case reached beyond one man's tragedy. It became part of the pressure that helped push the country towards civil rights action, not because America suddenly found its conscience all at once, but because stories like Isaac Woodard's made denial harder, they made silence harder, they made neutrality harder. His suffering joined the long line of truths that this nation tried to postpone but could not erase. And that is part of Isaac Woodard's legacy. Not only that, he was wounded. Not only that, he was blinded. But that what was done to him helped expose the sickness of a nation that demanded loyalty from Black citizens while denying them justice. His story stands as both warning and witness. A warning about what racism does when it is armed with power, and a witness to what Black Americans endured even after wearing the nation's uniform with honor. Isaac Woodard lost his sight, but the truth of what happened to him helped open the eyes of others. And that is why his name still matters. Because this story is not only about one man's pain, it is about the country that failed him. It is about the veterans who came home and found that the battle for dignity was not over. It is about the cost of freedom in a land that offered freedom unevenly. And it is about the obligation to remember Isaac Woodard not as a footnote, not as a symbol alone, but as a man, a soldier, a veteran, a citizen, a human being whose life was changed by racist violence and whose suffering helped force America to confront itself. Even now, that story asks something of us. It asks whether we will remember only the uniform or also the man inside it. It asks whether we will praise service in words, but ignore injustice in practice. And it asks whether a nation can truly honor its veterans while forgetting the ones it betrayed. Isaac Woodard deserved dignity when he returned home. He deserved safety. He deserved justice. He deserved to be seen. And because he was denied those things, we are still called to speak his name, tell his story, and remember what this country must never allow itself to become again. The country could debate what Isaac Woodard's beating meant. Isaac Woodard still had to live with what it had done to him. The violence of that night did not end when the blows stopped. It followed him into the days ahead, into permanent darkness, into a life that had been changed forever. He had survived war overseas and returned home in uniform only to lose his sight at the hands of a police officer in his own country. But Isaac Woodard's story did not disappear into silence. The nation heard about it. Black newspapers, civil rights leaders, and public voices pushed the case into public view. Orson Welles spoke his name on the air. The outrage reached President Harry Truman. 2 years later, in 1948, Truman signed Executive Order 9,981, declaring equality of treatment and opportunity in the armed services and beginning the desegregation of the U.S. military. Isaac Woodard did not receive back what had been taken from him. But his story helped force this country to confront what it was doing to Black veterans in uniform. That is why we remember him. Not only because he was wronged, but because his suffering exposed a truth America could no longer hide. But what happened to Isaac Woodard was not just one man's suffering. It exposed something much bigger. A Black soldier could wear the uniform of his country, serve with honor, and still return home to violence, humiliation, and injustice. That is what makes this story so painful. Isaac Woodard had done what America asked of him. He had served, he had survived war, and yet on American soil, He was denied the dignity he had already earned. His story forces us to confront a hard truth. The battle did not always end when black soldiers came home. For many, another struggle was waiting not on a foreign battlefield, but in the towns, buses, streets, and systems of the country they had defended. Sergeant Isaac Woodard deserved dignity when he came home. He deserved safety. He deserved justice. And because he was denied those things, we are still called to speak his name, tell his story, and remember what this country must never allow itself to become again.